2 webcams. Awesome. Excellent. Yeah. That should be it. Hopefully everyone can see us and hear us now. Hi everyone. Thanks for joining. Yeah, let's get started. So thank you all for joining. My name's Adam Cook. I'm organizer at PowerShell Southampton, and today, well, Matt, introduce yourself. Tell us who you are and what you're going to talk to us about.
Yeah, so Matt Dowst here in Dallas, Texas, and we'll be talking about update management solution in Azure and how you can extend that well beyond Azure to essentially fit all of your patching and update needs.
Right, Matt?
Yep, yep, and it's a pretty free form discussion. It's I don't have any canned things to go through. It's all an actual environment. So if there's any questions or want to see anything, put them in the chat, and Adam will let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to kind of dive in on that more in case you don't realize. I mean, hopefully you all see it on the side here on our video stream. There's a chat functionality, so by all means use that. Ask questions. Matt's happy, yeah, as he said, for me to kind of jump in and ask him those questions on the fly. So I'll be the relay here. So if you guys have any questions, definitely put them in the chat. Before we hand over, just one more thing I want to mention. It's about YouTube's quality setting. So while Matt presents, it'll be as 1080p hopefully, but depending on your bandwidth, it might default to a lower resolution. So in YouTube, if you hover over the video right now and if you click on the settings icon and click on quality, from there you can manually adjust the stream. You can change the quality to something higher. But yeah, no, with that out the way, let's get the wheels turning then, Matt. So I'm just going to switch scene here over to you and your screen. And yeah, take it away.
Cool. Great. So as mentioned, talking about the update management solution in Azure. So pretty much covered most of this, but the lead architect for the managed automation team out at Catapult Systems. So we do enterprise level automation and then also automations for our internal teams as well. Working on that. Worked in IT for over 15 years now. Everything from batch script to VBS and out to PowerShell and everything in between. Offered a couple chapters in the PowerShell conference book, and I'm currently authoring my first full book, Practical Automation with PowerShell, which is in early release right now. The fourth chapter just released on security, so securing your automations and keeping all that stuff up to date. And I also do a weekly PowerShell newsletter that post out on my website, dowst.dev, and I usually tweet about it. It's usually the best way to kind of find out about it. And just for my UK creds here, I have been to Trafalgar before and after the pigeons. So I haven't been back since I heard that you can't climb on them anymore. So I need to schedule another trip. But spent a lot of time over there, and I really enjoy it. So. All right. So, what is update management solution in Azure? It's kind of a big mouthful to say, but essentially, the way that it works is there's an Azure-based plane for it that you can use to control your update deployments, and these can deploy to Azure machines as well as machines in any other cloud or on your on-premise. There's an agent that gets installed that's part of the log analytics solution in Azure, which is constantly updating and adding new things, and we'll talk about some of that later on. But it really kind of gives you a single pane of glass, right? So you'll see all of your machines from everywhere because everybody's running a hybrid environment nowadays. Right, you'll get that one consolidated view on everything, and then the one place to be able to send that out. And that is Windows and Linux machines. So most major distributions of Linux are supported as well. Some of the key features of it, right? So obviously, I mentioned update deployments. You can do classification-based approvals in it. So you can say, only do security or critical. You can do just definitions. We'll see kind of some of that. You can leverage your existing groups to be able to create those deployments, right? So you'll have, Active Directory or, WAS or whatever you're currently using. You can integrate that into this process as well. And the big part of it is, kind of what we'll talk about for the most part here is the pre-patch and post-patch automation that you can tie into it. So again, it's all, no, not domain relevant, not cloud, it's all agnostic. So it's a pretty rich and capable system. So the way that it works is there is a log analytics agent that gets installed on the machines. This log analytics agent it's used for multiple things. The number one being obviously collecting logs. I'm sure the PowerShell group, so most people are probably familiar with Microsoft and Azure, but it's Microsoft hates it when you say this, but it's SCOM in the cloud, right? Collecting that information. Now, as part of that agent, there's also what's called a hybrid runbook worker. And what this does is it allows you to execute scripts locally on that machine, with those scripts stored in Azure. So the log analytics agent will look at your machine and say, okay, what, give me the details on the patches, right? It sends that up to Azure. And then you're in Azure, you have your portal in there where you can see what needs to be sent out. You create a deployment. It kicks off a script on those hybrid runbook workers, which then installs all the patches, does the reboots, does a recheck. It's a pretty robust system to get it all out there and ready to go. The interesting part about it is it itself is not a repository for the updates. So it's going to take the updates from wherever your machines are configured to get them from. All right. So if you have WSUS, Yum, apt, if you have private repos and everything, or however your machines are configured is how it's going to determine what patches to install and take care of that. So typical recommendation is, in a Windows environment to set up a, Windows Server Update Services server, point those to it, and then you can get granular control of what you're trying to deploy out, right? So in the deployments itself, you can specify, some exclusions, some inclusions, and then category based. But if you need to get really granular, then you're going to want to use your own repository backend. It can also use configuration manager software update deployment groups as well. So we can use that for its approvals and its telling machines where to get those from. So wherever you have them, wherever you need your machines to get their patches from, you can get it. So as I mentioned, onboarding a device is as straightforward as installing an agent on it, right? So you install log analytics, and it automatically installs the hybrid worker based upon your configuration in there, and we'll take a look at that. And then obviously, having a update repository we talked about is a good way to handle it. If you don't have a repository, it's going to go out to Microsoft update, right? It's the same as if you used app get, it's going to go out to whatever the public repos are, unless you configure some private ones. So to actually get it set up, all you need to do is create a automation account and a log analytics workspace in Azure. And in the automation account, you go in there, you tell it, I want to enable update management, and select your workspace and you put it together. There's some, not every region is supported, but for the most part, goes in there and gets it. It's pretty straightforward. Then to onboard an Azure VM is even easier. You literally go into the VM guest host, point it to which one you want it to go to, and it automatically onboards it for you. Onboarding non-Azure devices, you have to, as I mentioned, to install the agent. And so if it's a Linux agent, there's a little shell script that you can download and install. For Windows, there's a agent MSI, and I actually have a script on doing that automatically as well that we can take a look at. As I mentioned, there's different supported regions. The only caveat, the thing to pay attention to here is that the log analytics and the automation account need to be in the same region with each other, unless it is East US and East US 2. These two are backwards. Don't ask me why, I don't know. These East US was the first one that ever came online with this solution, so I'm assuming there was something built into the back end that nobody's ever been able to fix. But other than that, it's keep them in the same region, and you're good to go. So we'll go ahead and take a look at creating them and actually how they look. So since it's the PowerShell user group, we'll start with creating it via PowerShell. Right, so again, Microsoft's promise is anything that you can do in Azure, you can do through the APIs in the PowerShell and CLI. So that holds true here. So essentially, there's two components to it. There is the schedule. So you create a schedule, give it a name, your start time. You have to tell it if it's for update configuration, and that there's you can do recurrings or you can do one time. Really, the only caveat here is that you can't create something within a 5-minute window. And then you're configuring your update. So, the schedule that you just created up here, the resources that you want to add to it, and we'll go into this in more detail, but you'll see it in the portal, right? Whether it's Windows or whether it's Linux, which classifications you want to do, duration. So that's just a simple time span. And then the pre-task and post-task runbooks. Right? So this is where it becomes really cool and really powerful. The pre-task is going to run once the deployment starts. Right, a runbook in Azure Automation, for those who aren't familiar with it, is a script. It's a PowerShell script. It could be a Python script that are up in Azure. For update management, it has to be PowerShell based one, but essentially it will kick the script off at the beginning, and then at the post task it kicks it off when it completes. All right, so it's pretty straightforward. Generate our
Can you zoom in a bit
deployment.
there, Matt, just so we can
Yeah.
see the code a little bit more? Is that all right? Sorry to interrupt you, mate. Yeah, nice one.
It helps if I I'm not even connected. Okay. 1 second.
Oh, I see. You got
Grab
connect to the
yeah,
Azure in
grab
that
the
session. I see.
grab the wrong session. Hold on a second.
No worries. You're good.
Have any questions while I'm getting that pulled up real quick?
No, not yet. No, it was so far. It was just the font, the zoom a little bit. They just wanted to see the code you had there. But yeah, maybe when you come back, we could look over that again real quick. The splat you had going on, and just see those parameters with the zoom in with the bigger font.
Yep.
Cool. Oh, we do actually have one question come in by Adam Lisick. The question is, I have a question about pricing strategy. Is it pay for log analytics as used and per server and per automation time in minutes?
So that's a good question. So there is a charge on the per on the gigabytes used uh, for your logs that come in. The update management itself is actually free, so there's no um, charges for it. There is sorry um, the automation runtime. There is some charges behind that as well, but again,
Hmm.
it's very minimal charge that I've run this with customers with a few hundred servers, and we've actually never gone over the free allotment of minutes.
Okay,
So
that's good to know. And then presumably the log analytics will have some cost involved with it, right?
yeah, there's a per gigabyte log again to have not managed to actually ever hit the limit on it. I believe it's 5 gigabytes free per month, whatever your based upon your region and things like that. But it's relatively small. It also has the ability to set caps on it. So if it you know is getting too high, you can stop it on there's essentially a daily cap limit on there that you can set.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, so again, and we'll see all these parameters kind of in more detail um, in the actual uh, console here in just a second. But it I just created it in my other one, so our deployment is there now. All right, so if we hop over to Azure, just so this is just a standard Azure Automation account. So what this contains is all your, as I mentioned, the run books that you have. So these are all the scripts. You can import these into here. It is literally, if you have a PowerShell script, you can copy and paste it into one of these. There's nothing. Well, I'll take that back. There is one thing different. You cannot have write host in anything. Other than that, it is pretty much copy and paste straight in there. If you have anything write host, you got to change it to write output, but because there is no host when it runs. But so then all the update management, when you come into here, Microsoft put these giant banners on here the other day and not gotten rid of them yet. So you see here, this is where all your machines will show up. So you can mention we have Linux, we have Azure, we have non-Azure, uh, you know, have it all in there. You're missing updates. You can go in here. And again, it's all in the back end log analytics, right? So if I want to take a look at an individual machine, it's just going to take me here into the logs. And I can get all the details and basically anything I want. Uh, any way I want to slice it up, get that data. If you know some Kusto, you can get some pretty cool information and data out of here. So the deployment schedules, all right, so this is the one that we just created. So when you go to create a update deployment, there is options to do groups to update and machines to update. This can get kind of tricky because when you go into machines to update, it lets you select groups. The key piece to remember here is that when you put it as machines, right, so if I were to, if I had Active Directory groups or config manager groups, I could select them here. What that's going to do is when I hit the create button on this, it's going to take the members of that group and put them in here. All right, if I'm in groups to update and I can select groups here, based upon Azure resources, or you can create some queries and show you these two as well. These are going to evaluate at the time of execution. So if you have a recurring one, like I typically set one up to do definition updates on a daily basis, right? Every day at 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock. We do that based on a saved search. So if new machines are added or removed or brought in, they will just automatically be added and removed from here. I'm not having to go back through and keep recreating updates and all of those other items, right? So as I mentioned, you can filter on the update classifications. You can do include and exclude uh, based upon the on KBs in Windows. In Linux, it's just on a keywords. So you can do like star Java star to on an exclude to keep from getting Java updated automatically. The thing to remember in here is that include does not automatically exclude others, right? So you ask yourself, well, why would I use include? Include will include something that doesn't match what your classification filter is. Right? So for here example, I have it set to just do definition updates. Well, if I include the malicious software removal tool KB in here, that's an update rollup. It's going to include that one without me having to select all update rollups, right? But keep in mind, it is still dependent on what your repository is on the back end. So if it's not approved in WAS, it's not going to install, right? Then again, scheduling is fairly straightforward. It's yelling at me because we're within our 5-minute window, but and then your pre-scripts and your post-scripts, right? So this is where, so if you notice when we went into our runbooks, they're all just listed here. I can select them here and I can set parameters on them, tell whether I want to be a pre or a post. And this really is where you get a lot of the power and the really cool stuff that kind of comes along with the solution, right? Because if you can script it, you can do it, right? And then obviously maintenance windows, reboot options. You can do a never reboot or only reboot too, which is actually I use that in a couple of places where we want to patch everything and need it all to kind of come up at one time. Right? Set a separate deployment afterwards to reboot all at once. Right. So a lot of the big things, when it comes to patching, getting the patches installed is the easy part, right? The difficult part is handling things like managed reboots and starting and stopping services, ensuring things are coming back up, right? This is where these posts and these pre and post patch runbooks come in handy. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is these pre and post runbooks, they can only run in Azure, right? So in an automation account, you can actually create what are called hybrid worker groups, right? These allow you to, it's on-premise server that I can use to execute my runbooks on, right? Every machine that gets onboarded into update management becomes a system hybrid worker, right? So it's essentially it's the system name and a big old long GUID behind it. That's the GUID that just matches the log analytics agent. Right? But in order to be able to run it on a machine, to have it selectable, you have to onboard it as a user hybrid worker. And what that gives you is when you then go into a runbook, say, stop Windows services, I can start it and I can say, go ahead and run on this machine, right? So depending on your environment and how you want to set things up, there's a couple ways that you can do this, right? So one is if you have different machines that you need to perform different tasks on during the reboot or the patching process, you can add them all in as a hybrid worker group, right? Just add each one of them as its own individual group. The other option being is you add one of them and then you use PowerShell remoting inside of your script to be able to do that, right? So and it gives you the tools in here to be able to do that as well, by being able to create credential objects and variables, right? So I can create a credential object that I can pass into a script so that it can authenticate out and do everything that it needs to do. So if we take a look at some of these ones that we have here, my screen refreshes. So as I mentioned, we'll see here our job has started. Always at the mercy of how fast Azure wants to work when we're doing one of these. So as your job's running, you come in here and you can see what it's how it's coming along. Right. So we have our pre-script. It ran. It's going out. It started on the machine. It succeeded because I told it to do definition updates, and now it's kicking off our postscript. Right. So if we go and we actually look at the jobs that got executed here, so a record of every job that runs is maintained for 30 days inside of this console as they complete. So this patch Microsoft OMS computer is the one when we're in that fancy console. That's what you're seeing there is all the output from this thing, just big and lots of verbose output, things like that. But this is what's controlling all the other machines. So it kicks off all those other machines, says patch Microsoft OMS computer. If it's a Linux machine, it'll be one called patch Linux OMS computer. All right, so you see it kicked off our pre-task runbook. One of the cool things about the pre-task runbook, if it has an exception and it fails, it will stop the entire deployment. All right, so when you're building your scripts for this, you can build in specifically things to fail if you don't want that deployment to go. All right, and then obviously the post task one will run off and do its thing as well. Another thing to keep in mind here is though if you exceed maintenance window, post task will not run. Right, so there's different ways to be able to look and handle things like that. So we'll take a look at some of the kind of things that you can do here. And what we did here is, right, so I have this runbook I've created called pre-task check starts, right? And what this runbook is, because my screen doesn't want to refresh, is it happens sometimes where a machine, the agent will stop working on it, right? And it can't, obviously, if the agent's not working, it can't patch. So what we're doing here is I've created a second runbook that is the get update states. All right, so if I pull this one up, all right, what this is going to do is I'm passing in the job ID from the patch OMS computers, right? The main job that exists on there, right? And as this goes down, it's going to then collect all of the other child jobs that may be in a queued or suspended state. Right. This way I can know if I have machines that haven't started patching yet. Right. But this is running as a pre-task run book, and it's the machines aren't going to actually start until the pre-task run book finishes, right? So that's where this this one comes into play, right? So this one is actually what it's doing, and you'll notice this is the new creating new automation schedule. It's the same exact command that we used previously to create the update deployment, right? New automation schedule. It's just this time it's not for an update configuration, it's for running another runbook. So you can schedule runbooks to run. And so then what I'm doing is I'm just adding 15 minutes to it. Say, okay, after 15 minutes, go ahead and check all the machines. That's more than enough time for them to, ensure that they've started and they've got those things going, right? So because I have update deployments that run, not a single customer lets me patch their servers during the middle of the day, right? I wish they would, but obviously we can't. So These are running all hours of the night, and I'm not going to sit there and watch every single one of them, right? But we'll know right away if hey, some of these machines were in our maintenance window and they're not starting, right? So get a notification sent out on that, right? And what this so this is a second way that you can then call a secondary runbook, right? So you can call runbooks from within inside of themselves by just uh, dot slashing it. So if you actually look at uh, we'll make it even easier. We're going to edit mode here. So when you're creating a runbook in here, if you have additional runbooks, which you'll notice pretty much every single one I have here has this at the very beginning of it, connect run as account, right? All these runbooks exist inside of Azure. So obviously you have to be able to authenticate with Azure in order to you know, do most of the things in here, right? So this connect Azure is another runbook. Essentially, you kind of look at them as kind of akin to functions, right? This connect one here, and this is where one of the built-in automation account commandlets come into play. So there are commandlets that are unique to runbooks inside of Azure Automation. You don't have to use them, but they add really awesome stuff to it. So you have different assets that you can define in here: certificates, credential objects, connections, variables, right? So when you create an automation account, it automatically creates this run as account, and so you can assign it's a managed identity, right? So you can assign that permissions to do other things that you need it to do. So essentially, I'm getting this connection information. I'm connecting to Azure, getting my automation account, my resource group name, and then just getting those results right back there from within here. So the kind of the like I mentioned, the best way to think about that is basically it's like calling it as a function, right? If it exists, it's going to run inside the same context as this runbook. Now there is a way to call a runbook in a separate context, which we will see here shortly. But essentially, it's coming down here, gets the machines, and then just sends an email to me. It says, "Hey, these machines haven't started." Right, and then I even little bit down here to clean up the scheduled job, right? So it does I don't end up with a a laundry list of schedules sitting in there that have only run once, right? Because it does create an object for each one of those, right? So this is kind of one example of a pre-script automation. A another pretty common example one is to start a VM, right? So obviously a machine can't patch unless it's turned on. So what you can do is you can uh, have this again, connect run as account, and you can even get the configuration. So if you've noticed this big old fun parameter here, software update configuration run context, this is a built-in variable that gets passed into the runbook uh, from the job. So you don't have to define anything in here. It just automatically gets populated with all of the information about that particular run. So we can see here what the group name was, what that parent job, its GUID was. I mean, even what our update categories, basically everything that we put in here, right? What our machine names are, everything in here. So I can take that context from it, say, okay, here's the software update configuration settings, the Azure virtual machines that you had listed in there, and then go through and check the status on each one of those machines and then start it, right? Pretty good. But the machine was shut off. It was probably shut off for a reason, right? Save money or or what have you, and we don't want to leave it on afterwards, right? So what you can do is you can actually do this is again is another built-in automation commandlet is set automation variable. Right, so I can write a list of the machines that I went ahead and I started in here, and then in the post script, we'll go ahead and say, okay, go check this variable. If there's machines listed in there, go ahead and deallocate them so that we can turn update management kicks off, turns the machines on, patches them, it's done, and it shuts them back down. So you're only getting your consumption charges during that time. Right. So again, just post task, shut down the VMs. Yeah, pretty straightforward. Stop it. Stop the VM. Now, as mentioned, there's two contexts that you can kick them off. If you do the dot sourcing, it works inside of the runbook, and these runbooks will only run as a pre and post task. They will only run inside of Azure. So what if you need to do something on a local server? All right, so there is there's another way to be able to invoke them using the start automation runbook. So start automation runbook is here. You can define another runbook name. You can give it a run on, which is the name of the hybrid worker. So the hybrid worker that I have listed here, right? It's gonna run our stop Windows service, and it's gonna stop bits and SNMP. All right. So it'll go through there. It'll kick that job off. Now it'll also do a wait here, so you can wait for it to complete, because obviously you don't want to start patching until your pre-task runbook is started. So if you just do start automation runbook, it's just going to keep going. So you add the wait in here, but then you can also add a timeout, right? So we get our timeout, set it to 10 minutes, or however you want it to go on to. The thing to keep in mind is that the time it takes your pre-task runbook to execute does not get added to your maintenance window. Right. So I've seen some people have pre-task runbooks that take 45 minutes to run, and they give it a 2-hour patch window. If they have a lot of updates, they could potentially run out of time. So you need to take that into consideration when you're building these. But essentially, you get your runbook, so we can get the status of this job that we created and see if it equals complete. If it doesn't equal complete, we'll do a throw. The throw will stop the execution of everything. So the updates won't patch, nothing will go on. It's all gonna just come to a halt, right? If it is completed, we're gonna continue on. Then we can get the output of the job, and then parse that, go through and see if we got the status. So the way that we run through here is a good idea. When you are returning back, when you're doing the dot sourcing, it returns back like it's running the same namespace. If you're doing the return output, it is going to return as a string, right? So a nifty little trick on this is to do your output as JSON. It picks up that string. You can parse that JSON here, and then do any. So if you wanted to do checks, ensure that those services did indeed stop, or any of those other things, we build that in here, right? So if we don't have a status of one, again, we're going to stop the whole process. Someone's going to come and intervene in here, right? Now the next, besides start and stopping services and start and stopping VMs, the next big thing that we usually see is managed reboots, right? So we have, for example, here when we did our patch, I had it update a single domain controller. Right? I have 2 domain controllers, obviously. Patch one, and then I want to patch the second one. I could sit here and try to guess what time things are going to end, and how things are going to go along. Or what what I've done is I created a post-patch script that is essentially the same as the one that we just saw earlier, where it creates an update deployment, but I'm sending it out to a different machine. So I'm saying, we finished here. Here's my new target machines to get. Let's go ahead and create a new schedule just 10 minutes from now, right? So I patched my first set of servers, everything went well. I come back through and I, run my patches again. It gets that post patch. It's going to create that second deployment, and then I can patch the other half of my domain controllers. Right, so that I'm never going to run into a situation where they both go down, in the same data center at the same time. It's all going to be, handled right here, and we do it uh, all through these PowerShell scripts. So the same thing here with like the Linux services, right? This is a Python runbook. You invoke a Python runbook the same exact way that you invoke a PowerShell runbook, which is, start automation job, give it the Python runbook's name, and it'll kick that off on a Linux server. I mean, it doesn't have to be. You can run Python in Windows. The PowerShell works. The PowerShell only works on Windows right now because it is still 5.1. 7 is on its way. So that is a lot. I know it's quite a bit of things on there. We do have any questions or?
No questions. Pretty good feedback. A lot of interest saying it's really cool. There was a comment about you can use managed identities instead of run as. Didn't know if you knew
Yes.
that. I think that Manbear Piet, maybe I said the username wrong, suggested you can use managed identities now.
Yeah, it is in preview. So the nice thing about it, so the run as accounts are unique to an automation account. So it kind of becomes a maintenance kind of pain in the rear. The identities you could create one, and that could go across any automation account that you have to be able to get that data and that information in there. So as we mentioned, there's the pre and post. You can literally take a PS1 file and click import, and it'll go in there. Troubleshooting agents, they've made this pretty simple. There's a troubleshoot Windows update agent registration script, and it'll go through and tell you, if you have all the right versions and things like that. You can actually install the agent all the way back to 2008 R2. It can only patch from 2012 R2 and up, but you can actually get reporting on it all the way back. And then same with Linux. There's a Python script that you can run to go through and check and ensure that you're getting all your information.
Real quick question.
One other thing.
Matt,
Yep.
What's your process for onboarding new on-prem servers into update management?
That is a great question. So I have a PowerShell script that I tend to use. Right, it's all you have to do is you pass it the workspace ID and the workspace key, which is in the automation account. And this will actually go out and download the agent, install it on the machine, configure it, and once it's in there, once the agent is log analytics agent is on there, it will onboard the update management itself. Right, so it by default it scopes to all machines that are in that that report to that automation account, or sorry to that log analytics. So the system-based hybrid worker and all that type of things will the rest of it will run, and they'll start showing up in your console here in usually about 5-10 minutes. You start seeing the data. Now there is a new process that is coming up. I don't know how many people are familiar with Azure Arc. So Azure Arc is essentially a new kind of control plane that they built into Azure to be able to bring your on-premise and your other cloud machines into Azure. So it creates a linked object in here from in here, you can actually now enable update management. So you can go in here, you can say, you know, install this. So essentially the same way that you would onboard a Azure VM, you can do the same in here. And again, you can also do this through Azure policy. So you say, you scope it to all machines. They get added to Arc. That agent and everything will get uh, pushed out for you. Another cool thing that they're doing is letting you do it backwards now. So if you have it in update management, you can add it into Arc. So
And that script, Matt, when say hypothetically you just got a new customer and they got dozens or hundreds of servers, what's your preferred method of deployment on premise for on premises for that script, like GPO? Like what's your game?
yeah, usually if they have a config manager or something,
Mm.
getting it pushed out that way.
Mm-hmm.
Usually GPO works. It doesn't like to work through PowerShell remoting.
Mm-hmm.
It's because of the DComs. I've been tweaking with it. I will have a new blog post up here soon, but something around here it likes to freeze when you do it through PowerShell
Mm-hmm.
remoting. So
Okay.
I've if they have config manager or GPOs in place,
Right.
that's good. I've actually pushed it through Jenkins too. So
Mm-hmm. Okay.
uh,
Fair enough.
done the Linux onboarding one through a Jenkins server to go out, get all of those out to all the different ones.
Cool. And presumably, can we have access to that script as like an example? Do you have that stored
Yes.
anywhere
Yep.
publicly?
So there's a GitHub repo that I've put everything that you've seen in here on.
Oh,
So
awesome.
and I'll provide that link here. Uh, so it's all the run books and everything, because I know I went through quite a bit pretty quick. Right. So it's
Yeah, quite a bit of code.
yeah. So all those run books and everything are out there. That in the I'll put that in the chat window for everyone to. Oh, I'm not signed in. Here, I'll throw it in Teams chat. Would you mind popping it in for the into
Yeah.
the
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can do that.
so one other thing we can touch on real quick is reporting. Right. So as I mentioned, everything on the back end of this is log analytics. Right. So you can use Azure Monitor and Azure Alerts here to be able to send you out notifications when things run and what went on with them. But one thing I will caution on is false positives. Right. The very first time I ever used this solution, 2-3 years ago now, I was like, oh, update run progress, installation status, awesome. And I started looking through. I was like, oh yeah, I just created an alert. Anyone that shows failed, send me an alert on. Ran my first set of patching and got about 36 alerts over and over and over again. What happens is this agent is actually pretty smart. It will, sometimes it'll try to do something. Your machine will try to install. Uh, you'll tell it, here's my monthly quality and the monthly security. If those are both approved, right, and it installs that cumulative first, and then it'll start trying to install the security. Obviously, the security is going to fail because the monthly quality is already on there. It'll fail. The machine will reboot itself. It'll check again, say, oh, well, I don't need this one anymore, and it'll flip it back to succeeded. So these actually get written in real time as those are going. So you can have failures in here that end up not being failures in the end. All right. So there is this fun one that I've written. here, which actually goes through and breaks apart all of the logs that are in there, and this thing is absolutely ridiculous. But again, it's on the GitHub, so no need to go through this. But what's really cool, as I mentioned earlier, right, when you run a job in here, this job output only stays for 30 days, right? But if you set your diagnostics in Azure Automation to forward their logs to the log analytics account, it will keep those as long as your log analytics retention is set for, right? Which goes up to 702 years basically, right? So I come in here and I can actually get that. We saw that really big, long, verbose output that we had in there from those job streams, right? You can then come parse through those. Okay, let's get the output from this patch Microsoft OMS computers. Computers is the one to, if it has the S on the end, that's the control one, right? If it doesn't have the S on the end, then it's the one running on the individual computer. So you can actually go and get all the outputs from all of those. So I can come down here and I can see, you know, okay, I actually failed this time around, right? The job failed to start. So but I turned the machine off and created a update deployment, turned the machine off. It failed, right? Because it couldn't connect to the machine. So that that is your end result. So you can take this query and then create an alert based upon it and send out, hey, here's the results of my patching that just went off last night. I can see in real time, and you can create these. You can add this to as a dashboard in Azure or anything else that you want in there. Um, Another false positive to watch out for as well in the reporting is in the update management dashboard here. It will show a machine as green and compliant if the patches if it has security and critical, if they haven't been approved in WSUS, right? So if you have a WAS server and you haven't approved this month's security patches, the machine considers itself to be compliant because none of the patches that are approved for it, it has everything that's approved for it installed, right? Essentially. So that's just, of course, if you run Qualys or Rapid 7 on it, it's going to come back and say that you're definitely not compliant. You're missing this month's security patches. But so that's just one thing to kind of be cognizant of. You'll see it'll turn green here. My environment's not very pretty right now, but we're all red. So those are kind of the things to kind of watch out for there. But that's kind of what we saw there. So the future on this, right, so it's already available in Arc. So they're really kind of combining that in together to be able to go on there. It still requires so if you do Arc, you have to have 2 agents on your machine. Everyone I've talked to at Microsoft says that that's not going to be the long term. It's eventually going to get there's going to be 1 agent to do it all. Hybrid worker extension for Arc, and I'm assuming that's probably when this is going to be the 1 agent for all. Is coming. PowerShell 7 runbooks are scheduled for Q4 this year, and then as mentioned, the user managed identities are already in public preview. So just kind of the key things. The exclusions work great. Includes does not automatically exclude. Right. Highly recommend having a repository backend unless you just want all your machines to go out to Microsoft Update, which, depending on how you have the machine configured itself, it could pick up preview updates. I've seen it happen. So I definitely recommend at a minimum having a WAS backend. And I can share another script that I have that I'll put up in that repo as well, that you can use to approve all the security patches for a update deployment before it goes, right? So that you don't have to have machines sitting out there. It makes it a whole lot easier. Just click a button and approve all my security updates and built some filters into it to be able to filter out like SQL and stuff like that. So you kind of get some false positives, and you know, if it fails to start, it's usually that log analytics stage. 90% of the time, you restart the Microsoft Health service, and it'll pop back online in a couple of minutes. So with that, I do have a 35% discount code. My book, as mentioned, it's in early access. So essentially, the way that it works is you buy the book and you get the chapters as they're written. Um, Getting about one chapter out a month. Hopefully, the whole book will be out by January. And the all the scripts are available up on GitHub, and essentially Dowst everywhere. That's one nice thing about having a nice short, uncommon last name. Twitter, Reddit, LinkedIn, Discord. It's Dowst is usually me. There's one other Matt Dowst, but he's a surfer, so I usually get all the tech stuff first.
Awesome. No, that was really good. I don't see any new questions, Matt. That was excellent. That was really, really good. Some pretty good feedback. People were keen that you shared the scripts as well, so that's good. Definitely opens my eyes for what's possible in Azure, that's for sure. There's a boatload of services going on in that place. Sometimes you just don't realize, right?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's the fact that you can get the Windows and the Linux just together in one just makes it worth it, even just for reporting purposes, even if you're not going to patch to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I did see one question pop in on if you can use it to manage workstations as well. Officially, no. I will tell you, because I don't work for Microsoft, I've installed it on a Windows 10 machine and it worked. It's you know it could be a tad bit overkill for a workstation to be patched that way, but
that's an interesting concept.
Yeah, we've done it with like managed machines, or dev machines that aren't online all the time. We want to turn them
To
on
be
and
fair,
do those type
sometimes
of things.
some applications can run on kind of server infrastructure as Windows 10. Definitely see that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I see old man bear on here is the REST API. So there is I haven't had a chance to play with it yet, but there's supposed to be an agentless patching service coming as well too. So
Yeah, interesting.
I don't know if that's going to be for on-prem machines as well. I mean, there has to be something on there for them to still be able to talk. But
Right, there would have to be some form of registration process still. That would have to be baked into the OS. Interesting. Awesome. Okay, well, I guess we'll wrap up. Right, that's pretty much everything, Matt. Is it?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, well, Matt, thanks for reaching out and doing this. This was really good. Really enjoyed it. For everyone else, thanks for tuning in. The video recording will be on the YouTube channel tomorrow. YouTube has to do this weird thing that takes hours before you can push it. And I just want to kind of make the call, really. If anybody's watching who would like to present, who would like to make content, who would like to give back to the community, please reach out. You can ping me on Discord or Twitter. Let me change scene here so you can find my Twitter handle. If you want to present, please do reach out. Always keen to kind of get content moving. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can kind of catch new stuff and join the meetup group. Presumably you have if you found out about this meeting. So pssouth.co.uk redirect you to the meetup page. And there is actually no session planned next. So right now on screen you see a silly heading, but that's just a placeholder. So I'm keen to get some more content. I haven't done a session since January. This is the second one this year, Matt. And I'm keen to kind of get the wheels turning again, especially as we're kind of hopefully coming out of this pandemic and kind of get things back on track. So, but yeah, nonetheless, thanks, Matt. Thanks
Yeah,
everyone for
yeah.
jumping in. That was really really good, really good. Thank you
I
very much.
appreciate you guys having me. And if anybody has any questions or anything like that, I mean, the best way to get a hold of me is on Twitter. So
Yeah, awesome. That's fantastic. Thanks all. Cheers.
thanks.